I know that I'm not Pastor Kyle, obviously. He is recovering this week, and he is doing better. I just got a text to tell everybody to thank you so much for your prayers, because he is recovering well from surgery and is doing well, but he also said that there's no Tuesday night Bible study. He needs a little more time. And also he might go back into surgery this week, depending on what the doctors say, so be praying for him for that. But nonetheless, the B team has stepped up. And so last week, he's like, yeah, I'm going in for the surgery next week. Is there any way you could preach for me? And I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And as soon as I said that, because I haven't done it in a while, God just absolutely dumped a bunch of stuff on my head. And I was like, no. Like, I can't preach on that. Absolutely not going to preach on that. Like, it's going to make so many people mad. God kept saying, I don't care. I was like, but I do. Like, these people like me, and they're not going to like me after the sermon. He was like, I'll take care of it. It's fine. And so we wrestled back and forth for a while, and I even called Pastor Kyle. I'm like, look, man, this is what I think God is telling me to do. He's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then he called me back later, and he's like, hey, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I do. And he's like, okay, that's fine. And we kind of talked it through, and so it's good. So I'm going to be honest with you today. Today is not a day that you're going to leave feeling good after church. So if that's what you came for now, you could go ahead and leave if you want. But today is not one of those days. But before we get to the hard stuff, I want to celebrate something. Last Sunday, actually, a week from today, Pastor Kyle and Christine and Katie and I, they came over for dinner last week, and we all sat down, and for whatever reason, we went to the Vines YouTube channel and went through and just watched a bunch of our services from, I think we started doing this in late 2020. Actually, we started in 2017 back at the old building. We had a few sermons there. So we watched some messages, we watched some services. And church, we have grown so much and came a long way in 10 years. The first sermon that we watched on YouTube, we counted. There was 15 people that were like we could see on camera. And that was in the middle, and there wasn't much space on the side in that old building. And so for whatever reason, it was just a low attendance day. And then we skipped forward to the first sermon that was in this building. And there wasn't an empty seat in the house that day. And so we got to reminisce. And then we went to COVID, watched some of the services that we, for lack of a better word, produced, and had our own little TV station going on. And we're there, and then we saw services and just continued to grow. We had people that were guest speakers, and it was just a really good time of seeing what God has done. And our conversation ended up going to looking at how the Vine Church doesn't make any sense. Every piece of data that is on this planet suggests that the Vine should have closed its doors a long time ago. And let me get going for you. So for a church of 80, that's what we've been averaging here this year, we should be in massive debt, struggling to find people to serve in ministries, and feeling very discouraged about the future of the church. Now, if you are involved in any sort of ministry at all, you know that is just simply not the case. But for some reason, we are growing in some ministries. We are thousands of dollars above budget every week. Seriously, I'm not joking on that. If you open your bulletin this morning, we were $4,000 above budget last week. That doesn't make any sense, okay? We're still adding new ministries to serve our community. The future of the church has literally never been more exciting since I've been a part of this church. Alone, we're getting ready to pay off a massive $250,000 debt that we took out 6 years ago, about that. For a church of 80, that's absolutely incredible. And by that, I mean like by the end of this year, that's going to be taken care of. That alone is massive. I should also add that the Barna Group, they do all sorts of data and surveys around the whole country for a bunch of things, but they do a lot for the church too. They say that if you're a church of 80, only about 20 people should be in small group. So that's 25%, if you didn't know that math. Only about 20 people should be in a small group. When we met as a discipleship team and to discuss the future of the church, we were right at 40 people in a small group for our church. So not only are we above the 25%, we're basically at 50% of our attendance in a small group. Now, the goal for us is to get to 100, obviously, and yes, I'm going to guilt trip you in a little bit. Get in a small group if you're not. Like, come on. It's a great time. But that's incredible. God has been doing incredible things throughout this church that literally don't make any sense. Logically, they make no sense, but yet we are here. So let's take a moment, and we're going to give God the biggest round of applause you've ever given anybody for the great things he has done for this church. It's great stuff. All right, that's all the good I got. Any good team, though, any good team knows that you cannot get complacent. God has done incredible things in this church, and he will continue to do incredible things in this church. But the moment that we get complacent, the moment that we sit back and go, hey, all right, this is good, we know that Satan is going to throw his little grubby hands in on everything and try to blow up the whole thing. The moment that we sit back, Satan is going to destroy everything. We must be on guard, as Jesus tells the parable of the bridegroom in Matthew. We must be on guard, waiting for the thief in the night. We must constantly be looking at ways to improve our faith in the Lord so that we are ready to go whenever God says go. We cannot just idly sit back. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about something that is very hard to swallow for everyone. Even when I was typing it out, and I did this in about 2 hours. That's how quick God dumped everything on my head. It is so necessary to look at, though, because if we are going to continue to grow as a church, we have to fix some of the issues that are going on. You can't just continue to go and put Band-Aids on everything, because eventually the Band-Aid's going to get torn off. We got to be able to fix some things. So today we're going to talk about generational gaps in our church. It's something that most churches are struggling with. It's something that our church does fairly decent, but there's room to grow. I don't know if you know this, but for the first time in the history of Christianity, there are 7 generations living and attending church. 7, not 2, not 3, 7. So here they are. I'm going to, just for reference, here are those generations. The greatest generation, I don't know why they got called that, but the greatest generation, 1901 to 1924. Yes, there are a few of those left, but I'm going to talk about somebody who is from that generation that is currently living and doing ministry a little bit later. We have the silent generation, which some of you were in, 1925 to 1945. We have the baby boomers from 1945 to 1964. Yeah, represent, right? Here. We have Generation X, Gen X as they're called, 1965 to 1980. We have the millennials that are from, now some of you are going to start to get confused because you just view young people as all millennials, and they're not. So here we go. Millennials are from 1981 to 1996. So that means the oldest millennial would be 27-ish, okay? So just where we're at. We have Generation Z, which is 1997 to 2012. And then my kids are in Generation Alpha, which are 2013 to 2025. They've already put a cap on that for some reason. So again, 7 generations living, and we're all trying to coexist as a family. One of the biggest disparities in the church comes from the gaps in all those generations. Think about back to your parents, even especially the baby boomer generation, right? Rock and roll, peace and love, that was going to be the death of our country, and here we are, kind of a thing, okay? Every generation that happens. Every generation thinks that they discovered sin for the first time, right? All of the bad things that God tells us not to do for great reason, they think that they've discovered it for the first time. And so we have generations that are yelling at each other and mad, and I saw an article the other day that, and I'm not hating on anybody, but actually it was last year, baby boomers are mad at millennials because we don't eat enough sliced cheese. That was Today Show ran that, and I was like, what the heck? And they had all this data, and I was like, okay, whatever. But so every generation is mad at the other for something, right? It's just generational differences. I came across the Christianity Today article, and I want you to hear the words that they got from this. They'll be on the screen. It says, younger Christians, I think it'll be on screen. Yeah, younger Christians often feel their elders are out of touch, behind the times, chained to antiquated notions of proper behavior. At worst, they are ill-equipped to do good work for the gospel because they refuse to engage the culture for Christ. All right, younger people. At the same time, older Christians often view younger generations as disrespectful, uncommitted to biblical holiness, or generally unwilling to hoe the hard row of Christian discipleship. At worst, they are compromisers who sacrifice Christian faithfulness in order to be accepted by the broader culture. Yikes. Right? Like, no duh. If that is the overwhelming majority of how people think, no duh, we have conflict among Christians. You know, though, as hard as it is to look at, I know there's a lot of common ground. I know that God can use our disagreements to make something oh so beautiful. I mean, the church alone is oh so beautiful. And I want to look at a few biblical examples today of how God instructs us to bridge that generational gap. So from your bulletin or from the screen here, you know that we'll be in Deuteronomy 34 today. So if you have your Bibles with you, please turn to Deuteronomy 34. To give you some context, Moses and the Israelites are staring at the Holy Land. They're the Promised Land, sorry. They're staring at the Promised Land. They haven't quite crossed over yet. God has already told Moses, hey, I'm not going to let you into the Promised Land, but I'll let you see it. And so Moses is literally on his dying breath. And in this passage, we'll look at somewhere later where he gives some final commandments, but in this passage, we're going to see where Moses does actually pass away. So starting in verse 5, Deuteronomy 34, it says this. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite of Beth Peor, but no one knows the place of his burial to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were undimmed and his vigor unabated. And the people of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses had ended, and Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded him. There's a lot of information in there, and we'll give you some more context here in a minute. But there's two facts that I want to look at. And older generations, I'm going to speak to you first. And I promise you, and you can check my notes here, that I am spending just the same amount, line for line, as much as I am on the older generations as I am the younger generations. So don't think that I'm calling one out over the other, okay? But I'm just starting with the older generations first. The first fact that I want you to see here is that Moses was 120 years old when he died. It didn't say that Moses was just chilling on a rock, passed away. He'd been sitting there for 30 years because he was hoping the younger generation stepped up. No. Moses was full of the Lord. Moses, to his dying breath, was serving the Lord. And he died when he was 120. A few weeks ago, Pastor Kyle discussed how we all should be running toward the finish line, but as some of us may be naturally closer to heaven, he told us that we should be speeding our pace up, not slowing down. So to the older generations, I implore you, speed up in your faith. Don't sit back. In 10 years of ministry, I've heard older generations say, I've done my time. It's time to let the younger people do the work. Or I've heard regarding, different ministries, we used to do that completely different, and there was nothing wrong with it then. Well, I'll tell you this. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 10, Solomon writes this. The great King Solomon writes this word of wisdom. He says, say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Now again, not my words, but the Bible, so be mad at God. But when we have this attitude, and even now, as I'm getting to be in an older-ish adult, like I have said that several times, like 10 years ago I did this, or 5 years ago we did this, why can't we? I've started to say those sort of things too, but Solomon absolutely writes, it's not wisdom that you ask this, it's pride. Because our ego doesn't allow us to sit back and watch or sit back and learn from the younger generations because what we did was successful 45 years ago. Well, culture looks a lot different 45 years ago, and puppet ministry might not work right, or bus ministry might not work the same way that it did. And those things were great and wonderful for my generation growing up or other generations that were growing up. They were great, but the culture today just wouldn't necessarily connect with that. So I ask you this: why, older generations, have you stopped serving? Is there actual merit to your reasoning? Has God called you to do something else? And if so, great. Or have you stopped serving out of selfishness and pride because you don't like how things are going, you're mad at somebody, or you just assume that the younger people will step up? Well, I answer that question this way. How will you know that younger people will step up if you have not helped raise them up? I can speak for the entire Christian millennial generation when I say this. Younger generations are starving for fellowship, for guidance, and discipleship from other generations. Starving. In fact, the Barna Group suggests that that is the entire reason why my generation and younger are leaving the church. Because we are not being guided in our faith, but we are being judged in our faith. We're assumed that because we're adults, that we should know how to go about the way, but really we've never been raised in the Lord properly, and we're doing the best we can. And so instead of correction, instead of discipleship, we get judgment, we get gossip, and then we leave the church. The second fact from Deuteronomy 34 passage is this. Did you notice how peacefully Moses died? Did you notice how peacefully he died knowing that Joshua was going to take over Israel? So flip your Bibles over a couple pages to Deuteronomy 31. Deuteronomy 31, starting in verse 6. And Moses is literally on his deathbed. He had just given this speech to the entire nation of Israel, saying, hey, I'm about to go soon, but don't worry. I have given all I can to Joshua. And then he says this to Joshua, beginning in verse 6 of chapter 31. Moses says, be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in sight of all of Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give to them, and you shall put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Again, I'm not older, so I can't speak for the older generations, but I know this. But thinking of my son's generation, that's 2 generations removed from me. You don't say that to someone when you are uneasy about letting them lead. You don't encourage someone when you are uneasy about letting them lead. So older generations, I want you to think to yourself, is there any young person right now that you have invested in? Is there any young person now that you can confidently say you are excited to leave the keys to the community in their hands? Or are you nervous? Prime example, several years ago, was in a youth ministry, and an older couple just wanted to come check things out, so invited them to come check some things out, and they had a great time and they had a blast. And before they left, the wife, she looks at me and says, Tyler, I'm really worried about the next generation. This is the time when the teens were eating Tide Pods, so just give you some context. And she said, I'm really worried. I'm worried that they're not getting biblically fed. I'm worried that we're not teaching them right. I'm worried, and just listed off all these worries. And I'm like, hey, I absolutely agree with you. I am worried myself. But would you come alongside of me and help us? Would you help raise up the younger generation with us? Because right now it's the blind leading the blind. At the time I was leading Generation Z, and I was just Dory was a part of a youth group that, not the same youth group, but a part of a youth group, and Dory is not even 8 years younger than me. So it was the blind leading the blind. It really was. And so I'm begging for older generations to come help, and the wife looked at me and said, oh, no, that's not. I don't do that. And it broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. So older generations, this is an open invitation to begin praying about what you can do to raise up other young adults. How fair is it to be quick to complain about the actions of younger generations when no one is lovingly and biblically explaining to us that our actions are wrong? Why are we quick to discuss and gossip about younger generations instead of pulling up our bootstraps, having hard conversations, inviting young generations to dinner, to coffee, to shoot guns in your backyard, whatever it is, to help guide them? Why have we strayed away from doing the biblical thing? So again, Moses isn't going to tell Joshua those words. He's not going to encourage Joshua. It's not going to say that Moses' eyes were undimmed and his vigor was unabated. It's not going to say those things unless Moses was going to die peacefully, knowing that the next generation was going to rise up and do exactly as the Lord has commanded. And I tell you right now, from my conversations with older generations, that is not your mentality. You are nervous, you are scared, and I get it. My generation is messed up. I get it. I absolutely agree with you. But we are starving. We are absolutely starving for fellowship, for guidance, and for correction. And I know it may be hard. I know the conversations may be tough. But it's going to come so welcomed. So welcomed. After Moses' death, we see in Joshua chapter 1 that Joshua is prepared to lead Israel because of Moses' guidance and discipleship. Joshua immediately looks to the Lord and gets to work. So read this in Joshua 1, verse 12, and this is kind of a mix here. We're transitioning to the younger generation. So older generations, I love you, I'm sorry. That was from God, be mad at him. It says this, Joshua chapter 1, verse 12 and 13, and then I'm going to skip to verse 16. It says, and to the Reubenites, to the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said this, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you the land. And they answered Joshua. So all of the people answered Joshua. All that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command them, shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. That was how the nation of Israel responded to Joshua's leadership. They said, wherever you're going, we're going, dude, because you followed Moses. Again, people rarely act like that in changes in leadership. But you know what Moses did? He took Joshua under his wing. He talked with him, loved on him, gave him grace when he fell, and absolutely trusted him. Older generations, do you trust in the younger generations? The choice is yours. Do you want to pass away angry and grumpy and at the younger people, or do you want to pass away like Moses did, full of vigor, your eyes undimmed, you're ready to meet the Lord, knowing that the kingdom is in great hands? Are you happy and excited for the younger generations to lead because you spent time curating and raising up young leaders? The choice is yours. All right, younger generations. Whew, it's our turn. We are not without fault in this gap at all between generations. In fact, our rebellious nature is probably the main reason that the generational gap exists. We spent way too much time listening to 90s punk rock. It's just true. And so our rebellious nature is the main reason why this generational gap exists. Not only have we failed to honor our elders, we have brushed them aside. We've made them feel useless and unwittingly robbed ourselves of input from those who have experience and history with the Lord. We are so busy charting out our own course and having our own revelations that we have turned around to find that there's no one there to cheer us on. Now, this was in different context, but as my grandfather used to tell me, you made your bed. Now you have to lay in it. One thing that's very easy to overlook our passage today is Joshua's obedience toward Moses. Not one time do we see Joshua telling Moses, hey, step aside, old guy. Not one time do we see that, but Joshua faithfully walked alongside Moses until it was his time to step up and lead the Israelites. Younger generations, how wrong and backwards are we to quickly push older people to the side? I pray that the Lord can forgive us in this regard, and as Leviticus 19:32 reads, you are to rise in the presence of the elderly and honor the old. Fear your God, I am the Lord. I will tell you that in the King James Version it says, for you are to rise in the presence of the gray-haired. That's how it says it in the King James, so just know that. So I wanted to change that translation just a little bit to help out the elder generations. But you are to rise in the presence of the elderly generations and honor the old. Younger generations, are you honoring the old? Do you fully respect your elders, or do you write them off because you think they're out of touch with society? When was the last time that you went out of your way to speak with someone from the older generations in this church? Have you sought out the wisdom and experience they possess? Or do you too sit back and gossip about the elderly? Remember, the older generations have lived the life you are currently living. It is a great thing to be in fellowship with our own generations, but folks, you know just as well as I do that asking questions to our own generation is again like the blind leading the blind. We are all guessing because we've never done this before. We have never raised kids. We've never balanced a checkbook. We've never been a Christian as adults. And in a culture that is so against Christianity, you know who has? That's right, the older generations. Virtually everyone above the age of 60 tells me all the time that I need to slow down. Every single person that I know. Whether it's church stuff, work, sports, or doing stuff with my boys, our lives are currently filled with something. In fact, I can pull it out and show you. The calendar in my phone, I went and looked because I was curious. I don't know, it's kind of hard to see it. But there is a dot on my phone under every single day in November, meaning that something is happening in our family every single day in November. Every single day. Now, it might just be an evening thing, but every single day. In the new year, because of advice from my pastor, my therapist, mentors, and other people in my family and my wife, we are going to slow down as a family. I'm excited about this because it'll leave room for time, for family time, and ministry family time. One of my goals for the new year is to make room for new ministry opportunities that my entire family can get involved in. Yes, even my 2.5-year-old. And that's difficult, but the Lord will provide. I know. But that's a goal. One of the things, this is going to make a lot of people mad. And when I wrote this, I almost didn't say it, but I was like, God, come on. He's like, nope, say it. Gosh darn it. All right. One of the things that my generation gets terribly wrong is our eagerness to fill our schedule with family events where we don't interact as a family. Sports schedules come to mind. I know for a fact that Satan is using the kids' sport world to distract us from our faith. It's true. We will say to ourselves, oh, well, you know, it's fine. We'll go and we'll talk about our faith with the other families that are sitting there, and, you know, we'll go in fellowship with them, and you are lying out of your teeth. You've not done that one time. I have said those things. I have done those things with my kids, and I have not done it one time. And everybody else that I talk to has not done it one time. We also like to use family time where we are interacting as a family to distract us from our faith. My generation is terrible with church attendance because we're on vacation or we're camping or the weather wasn't quite 75 degrees. Do you think that Joshua failed to follow God because it was inconvenient? Of course not. It was super inconvenient. It was super inconvenient to lead an entire nation of complaining nomads, but Joshua did it so well. Why? Because he listened to God, he listened to his elders, and trusted in the wisdom of those around him. The older generations are screaming at this at us. So I am screaming it as someone who struggles with this. Is God in control of your schedule? Are you busy just to be busy, or are you furthering the kingdom in everything you do? Better yet, has your extracurriculars became your family's idol? You know how I know that this is a problem? I know this is a problem because of small group attendance. All three small groups have multiple generations, and I know we joke about, the one I lead is younger families, and Ray's kind of a mix, and the Tuesday night is, mostly older people. It's not really, maybe, yeah, mostly, but it's not really true. We have multiple generations in all three small groups. And after talking with the small group leaders, every single time that something happens that is not church-related, on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, or on a Friday, people don't show up. I'm not saying this to guilt trip you. Not saying this to guilt trip you at all. But how are you going to further your faith? This is to both generations. How are you going to further your faith or to show younger generations, and yes, to my generation, your kids, that your faith is important if you don't show up to where God is moving? I can confidently tell you and stand here today and admit my sin. God is not in control of our schedule. But it's a sin I've recognized. It's a sin that we have brought to God. It's a sin that we've asked for forgiveness for, and I pray and hope, younger generations, that you do the same thing. Following Christ is never convenient, but it's oh so good. I am reminded of the words from Jesus in Revelation chapter 3, 15 through 16. It says this: I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. We are a generation of lukewarm Christians. This is mostly to the younger generations, but it does apply for everybody. We rarely read our Bibles. We don't go to church at the first thought of a better time. We make excuses as to why we aren't serving. We try and justify our actions to make it seem as if we are trying to choose our family, but in reality, though, we're not choosing Christ. What better way to raise your kids up in the faith, as Proverbs suggests, than showing our children what it looks like to be a Christian? It looks like service and fellowship. It looks like truth and grace. It looks just like a beautiful mess. That is how we're going to raise up younger generations. To the greatest generation, to Generation Z, that's mainly everybody who's in here right now. How are you going to raise up the younger generations beneath you if you are not active in your faith? Grandparents, great-grandparents, I'm telling you the exact same thing. The only reason that I am a Christian today is because of my grandparents. Not my parents. My parents don't go to church. They believe in God, but I'm not so sure that they would call themselves Christians. But it was because my grandparents showed me what service and fellowship looked like. That is why I'm a Christian today. So grandparents and great-grandparents, even as full-grown adults staring at the finish line that is heaven, your work is not done. All right. Let's take a breath. Sometimes it's very good to hear what we need to fix. But if you know me, I'm never one to tell you that you need to fix something without first suggesting a few plans. I feel like that's not fair. So let's look at this. To the older generations, I'm going to come back to you, and the younger generations are going to go back. First, I pray to the older generations that you can finish the race by sprinting across that finish line. And I want you to also be praying, God, how can I sprint across the finish line? I'll give you two examples. I talked about my grandparents, but my grandfather, he passed away a few years ago. And he, if you knew him, he knew he could not get around so well toward the end of his life. But that man would sit in his chair, and he would grab that phone, and he would call people. He would call people, discuss their faith. When he did go out in the summertime, he'd go to nursing homes and visit people, visit his friends, and he would always ask them, do you know the Lord? How's your faith? When we built this church, this half of this church, we sat a chair right in the middle of that hallway. Steve's going to think I'm pointing at him, but I'm not. Right in the middle of that hallway, and he supervised the whole time. He was here faithfully, he was here faithfully when he felt good enough to be here. Almost every day. And from time to time, he'd be asking, what can I do? And we have a pile of metal or copper or something laying in that we knew we were going to take and try to get some money out of. And he'd say, get one of those young men to load up the truck. I'll take it and take care of everything. And he would. He would not ask for a dime to do that. He didn't go to this church. He went to another church. He didn't ask for a dime of any of that money. One of my favorite memories, too, is that he would also hire kids in Ladogas. This man, we're talking 70, 75 years old. And when me and my brothers got old and went to college or whatever, and we could no longer help with the farm work, he would hire kids around the town of Ladoga, and he would get in his golf cart and go pick them up in the mornings. They would split wood and feed the sheep and all the stuff that we did as kids. But he would spend time with them. There was a lot of projects that didn't get done. But he would spend time with them, asking them, do you know the Lord? What's your faith look like? So this 75-year-old man was with these 10 to 15-year-old kids, showing them what hard work was, talking to them about their faith, and even took a few kids to camp, paid their way, put them in the truck, drove them there, dropped them off. He did that up until the day he died. And it's a lot of the reason that I'm a Christian today. My Aunt Jean, currently alive, still living her best life, 99 years old. She works with Sherry often at the Methodist Church. And most weeks, she's at that church on Monday mornings, helping count the offering. Towards the end of the week, sometimes she comes in and she shows up to fold bulletins. 99 years old, and is sprinting toward that finish line. Sprinting toward it. These two people found problems that needed to be solved and walked alongside the Lord in serving the kingdom. Yes, they were very little things. We could have taken the scrap to the junkyard. Yes, Sherry could count the money by herself just fine. She knows math. Yes, Sherry could by herself fold the bulletins. But they saw where God was moving. They see where God is moving. And they went. Second, I implore you to adopt a person from a younger generation and spend time with them, showing them the way of the Lord, inviting them to dinner, and please disciple us so that you, when you do finally one day cross that finish line and you're staring Christ in the face and laughing at us that we're still here, you can have a peaceful attitude about that. Just like Moses did when he passed away, knowing that he was leaving this world in the younger generation hands. Instead of gossiping, which James tells us that God despises, by the way, about younger people, why not pull us aside and call us out privately? Then guide us and show us how to be better in our faith. That is exactly how Paul tells us to do it. That is exactly how Jesus tells us to do it. That's what we saw Moses doing every single time there was a generational leader change in the Bible. That's exactly what happened. To the younger generations, I want you to first pray. Pray how you cannot have a lukewarm faith. How can you realign your life so that we can show our kids what true faith looks like? See where God is moving and go there. And please, respect your elders. Do not just throw them aside. They are so valuable, they are so wise, and we simply need to listen and learn from them. That is the biblical way. Folks, the only way for the vine to exponentially grow in our community is if we come together unified as one, just as Jesus prayed for us in John chapter 17. To do that for both generations, we have to stop gossiping about one another, and we have to start showing grace biblically and holding each other accountable. If I'm doing something that you know is not glorifying the Lord, come talk to me about it. I'm begging you, come talk to me about it. I don't know that I'm messing up. Clearly. Please come and talk to me about it. And younger people, please, 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 stop gossiping about the older people as well. Go and find an older person whom you respect already and ask them, can you please adopt me? Can you be my grandfather? Can you be my grandmother? Can you show me the way of the Lord? I am stressed. My hair has fallen out. I cannot continue to go on the path that I'm going, and I need someone to guide me. Younger generations, please, please do this. So this week, I challenge everyone to this. Find one person who was older or younger and invite them into your life. If the top generations do this, we are going to start a reaction of events that will keep the world in a better place for generations to come. The reason that this world is in the place that it's in is because every generation thinks that they're better than the other one. That's sin. That's absolutely sin. That is absolutely from the fall. But God is telling us that is not the case. Every generation, even my son's generation, brings stuff to the table that is very important. 1 Corinthians 12, 1 Corinthians 13, 1 Corinthians 10 too, we are all one team, we are all one body, we are all one family working toward the common goal. What you can bring to the table is important. I don't care if you're 90, I don't care if you're 99, I don't care if you're 7, I don't care what age you are still valuable to the growth of the kingdom. So we're going to have a time of invitation. And usually this time of invitation is for those that haven't accepted Christ for the first time, and that's what this time is still for. If you have not accepted Christ and wanting to have him in your life, like this is definitely the time to do that. But I'm also calling that this is a time of repentance. We're going to sing the song, I Surrender All. And that is a song that we need to sing together and surrendering everything. We're giving up the being mad at the older and the younger generations. We're giving up the gossiping. We're giving up the not working together. We're giving all of that up. We're surrendering it all to the Lord. And folks, the kingdom is going to grow faster than you've ever seen it in your entire life. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much that we are able to come together as one family. And just as a normal family, Lord, we often mess up. We often yell at each other. We often think that the other one is not right or whatever it is, Lord, but I pray now that we can get rid of that. I pray that we can just come together as one to grow your kingdom, that we can go to where you're moving, it doesn't matter what age we are, and we can work together for this common cause of reaping the harvest that has already been, that's ready to be sown. So Lord, I pray that we can come together. We can unify. We can love each other. And spread so much love and hope to this world that is Jesus.